There are people that die on these buying sprees. Every year this happens in this country. People literally die because they're trampled to death because of these things. But another aspect that we don't think about is just garbage production. And the fact, one of the professors that was at my university, he taught environmental studies. He had zero garbage production in his home, and he used to take his students to his home to show what he did. In other words, people can actually live reducing their garbage to a great extent, but everything is packaged. Totally unnecessary packaging, and this leads to these landfills. It's beyond belief what's happening, and again, who suffers? The animals. They eat this stuff. When everybody lets off those helium balloons go to the ocean, they eventually go down, and turtles swallow them. They get the obstruction. So these simple things that people are doing without thinking. And now we have the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is bigger than the size of Texas. It's a huge, massive swell of garbage in the middle of the Pacific Ocean that, because of the tides and currents, it all tends to go to this one area. Now, there's a verse in the Quran. The angels ask God, and obviously this shouldn't be taken like a literal type conversation, but the angels ask God, when God created man, in our tradition, the human being, how can you put someone therein who will cause damage and bloodshed when we celebrate your praise and proclaim your holiness? So the angels were asking this question. And there's a reason why the commentaries give. I'm not going to go into that. And you can certainly see that the incredible amount, over almost 200 million people were killed at the hands of other people in the last century, the 20th century. And we came into the 21st century with a lot of hope, but it begins with 9/11 and then these terrible wars that have affected us. But the response that God made was, "Inni a'lamu ma la ta'lamun." I know what you don't know about the human being. And this is what we have to keep in mind. I put these pictures up because these are my personal teachers. These are people that I studied with. And there's a verse in the Quran that says that we elevate those who do not want to sow corruption in the earth or to be elevated. And this is what we have to remember as a species, that we have people in this world that remind us of who we really are. We're not jellyfish. We're not mindless, spineless consumers. We have human hearts. We have the ability to know infinity. We can conceptualize it. No other species can do that. We are something amazing. And we have to remind our young people of that. Lost in this world of false idols, of images of women that are so degrading. They are so degrading, and I don't need to name names because you know them. You see them on the television. You see them on the covers of magazines. This is not who we want our young girls to grow up emulating. We don't want our young men to grow up emulating the lowest forms of life on this earth. The cockroaches, the rats, the jellyfish. We want them to soar with the eagles. And that's what we're here to do and to remind people. And that's why, as far as I'm concerned, as religious people, the religious leadership, we have failed so dramatically. We have failed our young people. We have the halo effect, and then we have the clay feet syndrome. They don't see people walking their talk. They don't see people living it. They don't see the gift of sanctity in their beings, in their presence. And that's what we need to remind ourselves, that we have to become these people. We have to be these people that have graced this earth, reminding us this is not what it's about. We're here for a short temporal time, and we have work to do. And our work is in discovering ourselves and in serving others. This is the work. We're not here to consume. We're not here to indulge ourselves. We're here for something much greater, and we constantly need to be reminded because we're a forgetful species. When the elephants came to honor the man who had looked after them, and some of you may have seen this, but they walked for over a day, even before he died, and then held vigil in front of his house. These are signs for people that reflect. The animals pray for us. According to our tradition, the fish in the ocean pray for the righteous. Our prophet said, "Al-mustarah wal-mustarihu minhu," the one who has repose and the one others have repose from them. They said, "Who are they, O Messenger of God?" And he said, "Those who live righteously, when they die, they have repose. And those who live corrupting, when they die, people, trees, rivers, and animals have repose from them." That's the choice. And I really want to drive this point home because I think this is one of the most important verses for me in the New Testament. And I'm in a great Christian city of Louisville, traditionally. You see churches everywhere. You know, there was a love of Christianity, which is a great faith, and there's incredible amount of beauty and truth. Despite the history, we tend to forget that the history of religions is the history of their ego, not of their soul. But for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. People that created planned obsolescence, this is from spiritual wickedness in high places. And we have to recognize that we cannot support these people. That there are people out there that are actively engaged in harming this world. They're doing it because they're complete slaves of their own desires. And you cannot be a steward if you're filled with your own egoistic desires. You can't. And that's why one of the things that we have to remember, the Catholics divided the sins into the hot sins and the cold sins. And we tend to forget, the hot sins are easy to recognize: gluttony, wrath, and lust. And Dorothy Sayers reminded us that when a society loses its spiritual center, sex is always the spiritual outlet. So this obsession with sex, which is also related to the rape of the earth, to the way we treat Mother Earth because of our degradation, of our objectification of women. And this is much more a male problem than a female problem. Pornography is largely a male problem, but not entirely. But we have to remember there are hot sins and cold sins, but the cold sins are often praised in our society. The sins of avarice, right? The sins of envy. The sin of pride, the great sin, which is a sin against one's excellence. And then the sin of sloth, which sloth is not laziness. Acedia, in the traditional understanding, sloth was spiritual laziness. A CEO could be out there working a 120-hour work week, and he's still slothful because he's forgotten his soul, or she's forgotten her soul. And this is what we have to remember. Robert Frost said, "Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice." It's the hot sins or the cold sins that are going to kill us. And we have to really take this seriously, and it's our spiritual traditions that address this root problem. It's not complicated. The problem is not complicated. Thank you very much.